Let's bring in the Chief of Staff of the White House, Mark Meadows, with us. First interview since he took that job. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Brian. Thanks.
Okay, first let's talk about the violence in those cities. It captured the president's attention. That's why he tweeted about it. But this is something that came up before. He wrote a letter to these cities saying, try to get crime under control, or I'll assert myself in that. And Mayor Lightfoot came out, says, I got a message for the president for the common theme of his misogynistic, racist rants. The thing you need to remember, we're all tough women. We're not going to take any stuff from anybody. Is that the type of reaction you thought a mayor under fire who can't control their city should have?
Well, it's certainly not the response, and it's certainly we see the results this morning from the weekend of violence. That really the president is not only standing ready, but he has been ready. About 8 days ago, he instructed a number of federal support teams to make sure that across the country that they stand ready, not just in those cities, but in Seattle, in Portland, St. Louis, other areas where literally we've got DOJ and Federal Protective Services there standing ready. So it's time that we make sure that our cities are safe, and if the local police need help, we'll stand ready and be there for them. And the president's been very clear about that.
But Mark, you have to be invited, right?
Well, certainly there are some times when you have to be invited, but other than that, this president is going to take action and make sure that all life is protected. And when we look at the Constitution, we have a constitutional duty to make sure that those cities are safe. And far too often we see liberal mayors and liberal leaders of these cities looking the other way while they want to throw a whole lot of insults towards Washington, D.C. when we see a meltdown in their own cities.
So you have some people around the country, like the governor of New Jersey, who Steve and I were talking earlier. Steve, you said the numbers in New Jersey are down now when it comes to COVID?
Yeah.
All right, so the governor there is saying everyone, no matter where you go, you have to wear a mask. Listen to what he said about it.
We're only as strong as our weakest link right now. As you mentioned in the outset of the program, I said we went through hell. We cannot afford to go through hell again. We need a national strategy, I think, right now, and masking has got to be at the core of that.
Yeah, no one wants to go through that again. Is that necessary, though? Do you think that that should be a state-to-state issue and up to the local leaders, or should it be a federal mandate? You have to wear a mask no matter where you go.
Well, certainly a state-to-state issue. As we look across the country, obviously the narrative is the COVID cases are rising, but testing is rising exponentially. We've now tested almost 10% of our country, and yet when we look at mask and the wearing of masks, that's done on a location basis when you can't have social distancing, but certainly a national mandate is not in order. We're allowing our governors and our local mayors to weigh in on that.
And in fact, the President of the United States himself, Mark, weighed in on masks last week, and he told one of the correspondents for Fox Business that he was fine with masks. He'd wear a mask if he was in tight quarters going forward. Could be in tight quarters toward the end of this week, because we understand the campaign is going to head north to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where apparently there's going to be a rally. It's going to be outdoors, hand sanitizers. Everybody's going to get a mask and are encouraged to wear a mask, which is different than the Tulsa event, which we're looking at right there. Why do you think the campaign is now saying, hey, we think it's in your best interest to wear a mask at this outdoor rally?
Well, obviously, we're looking forward to being in the Granite State and back with the folks up in New Hampshire. And as we look at that, it's more a factor of precaution. And as we look at that, we're a nation of freedoms. And certainly we want to make sure that people are free to assemble. And yet what we've seen is far too often we've said we're just going to shut everything down. I'm not in favor of that. The president's not in favor of that. And so as we start to open up, if masks are appropriate, and you were right, the president's mentioned that he's willing to wear a mask if appropriate in tight quarters. I know a number of us have done the same, but it's all trying to make sure that we deal with this virus and make sure that the American people know that help is on the way. I want to stress a couple of things. When we had testing problems, this president acted. When we had problems with ventilators, this president acted. When we had problems with PPE, this president acted. And there's good news on the way. whether it's therapeutics or a vaccine, help is on the way. We will be able to make sure that we deliver those by the end of the year.
Yep. So, Mark, go ahead.
Can I just ask a follow-up? Thank you, Brian. Mark, you said that the New Hampshire event, you know, they're out of an abundance of caution and taking more precautions. You know, hindsight is always 20/20. Should they have taken more precautions with the Tulsa event?
Well, listen, we have not seen major outbreaks with the Tulsa event. You know, a lot is there. When we start to look at that, there were a few that actually had contracted the coronavirus, but we want to make sure that other people feel safe, and so in doing so, we allow that freedom to take place, and certainly want to encourage that going forward.
Mark, the president said 99% of these cases, the COVID positive cases, are harmless. Where did he get that stat from? Or
Well,
is,
I mean,
is that a generalization?
No, I don't even know that it's a generalization. When you start to look at the stats and look at all the numbers that we have, the amount of testing that we have, the vast majority of people are safe from this. When you look at the deaths that we have, if you're over 80 years of age, or if you have three what they call comorbidities, diabetes, hypertension, heart issues, then you need to be very, very careful. Outside of that, the risks are extremely low, and the president's right with that, and the facts and the statistics back us up there.
So, Mr. Meadows, what do you know about the PPP? Because there are a lot of people that are freelancers or out of work, and they're getting that money from unemployment. And they're also, I know the president was giving $600 a month to those individuals. How long will this be extended? Will it be extended? What's the next phase for those folks who are worried about whether or not they're going to go back to work and can't afford to pay their bills?
Well, the president was working over the weekend to extend that PPP program. I want to give a shout out to Secretary Mnuchin. I challenged him early on when this whole program about helping businesses and making sure that they could stay afloat happened. I said, Secretary, there's no way that you'll be able to get this implemented in a short period of time. Not only did he prove me wrong, but within 7 days it was up and running. It's been modified over and over again. He continues to be all hands on deck. And so we're going to provide help for the American business owner, for the hardworking American men and women, to make sure that this temporary, and I want to stress, this temporary downturn in the economy does not affect them personally. A lot of very difficult circumstances out there. We're well aware. Those are getting communicated to the president each and every day, and he stands ready to act.
Mr. Meadows, we tried to get you on the show your first day as the new chief of staff, but you know you were busy. What has been this? I would imagine it's been kind of an eye opener, because when you are at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue and you see, you know, how the White House operates, you probably didn't realize what all the chief of staff does, and now that you realize you have a big plate that is always full 24/7.
Well, it is full 24/7, but my job pales in comparison to the President of the United States. The interesting thing is this president will do more in the next 4 weeks than Joe Biden and his team did in the last 40 years. And so you just need to stay tuned, because starting this week, you'll see executive orders. You'll see business that actually goes forward from the Oval Office. When Congress doesn't act, this president's going to make sure that he steps.
What kind of executive order, Mark?
Well, we've got a number of executive
Give
orders
us a
that
hint.
deals. I'll give you a couple of hints, all right? So a sneak preview here. We're going to be looking at how we make sure that China is addressed, how we bring manufacturing back from overseas to make sure the American worker is supported. We're also going to look at a number of issues as it relates to immigration. We're going to look at a number of issues as it relates to prescription drug prices, and we're going to get them done when Congress couldn't get them done.
Well, we'll see what happens. Is the message from the president from here on in, being that the cases are growing and it's the state's opportunity to get it under control in Texas, Arizona, in Florida? We have to live with this. We have to live with the virus, and we have to go on. And is that a change of tactic? Instead of crush the curve, then the curve's going up, but you're not going to shut down the economy again. Is that the theme?
Well, we're not going to shut the economy down again. I think the theme is this, is that we have to adjust our personal lifestyle in a temporary basis because help is on the way. I mentioned earlier about those vaccines. Literally tens of billions of dollars. This president authorized tens of billions of dollars to make sure that we have a vaccine, not a month early, not 6 months early, but a year earlier than most would say that it's even possible. He's willing to invest to make sure that whatever adjustment we have to make in our lifestyle is temporary. We got to get the schools open this fall. We're coming up with plans to do just that.
You know, Mr. Meadows, being in this job, we're all fascinated with politics, and I know that's been a big part of your life. I'm from South Carolina. You're a Carolina guy, too. You're from North Carolina. And you left Congress to go and serve the president and his administration. That left your seat open. And I know that you endorsed Linda Bennett. She was beat by Madison Cawthorn. We've had him on the show. He's 24 years old. He is a real estate investor. He was in a car accident a while back and is now in a wheelchair and married. And he's just he is ready for the job. And he's running against Mo Davis, who's the Democrat. And they're going to have a big fight in November. It's a swing state. North Carolina shifted over the last few decades, I'd say. What do you expect to happen?
Well, Madison will be a great member of Congress. I know Madison actually nominated him to the Academy before that tragic event. Obviously, he'll be a great member of Congress. Mo Davis needs to understand that Madison's going to bring it. The people of Western North Carolina have rallied behind him, will continue to do so. And in November, we will keep that seat. But not only that seat, we will pick up additional seats because it's time that Congress starts getting things done and helping this president instead of being an obstructionist.
Mark, there's no doubt about it. China's front and center almost every day, and now you have 2 aircraft carriers heading into the South China Sea. We have not heard much about what the president's going to be doing. We know India has banned all apps, Chinese apps, because they killed 18 of the Indian military members. What are those aircraft carriers? What's their mission, and what's our mission there?
Well, our mission is to make sure that the world knows that we still have the preeminent fighting force on the face of the globe. This president has invested more in our military, more in not only the hardware, but the men and women who serve so sacrificially each and every day. He continues to do so, but the message is clear. We're not going to stand by and let China or anyone else take the reins in terms of being the most powerful, dominant force, whether it's in that region or over here. And the message is clear. Our military might stand strong and will continue to stand strong, whether it's in relationship to a conflict between India and China or anywhere else.
All right. Mark Meadows, the Chief of Staff for the White House. Mark, thank you very much for joining us from the North Lawn. I think in the last 15 minutes, you probably now have about 75 text messages, things you've got to do immediately. Thank you, sir.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right. Thank you, sir.